Let's explore the landscape of maturity, or the landscape of perspective that spans despair to naivete, to false optimism, to real optimism. What are the levels of development? And I think initially we begin with a naive optimism of the fallen god, goddess, the entitled child that expects things to go well and be perfect because every child believes that they deserve to be the center of attention. And so we could call this the naive god or goddess. And as we move into a healthy adolescence, this becomes despair. So we move from naivete. It's all going to just wonderfully and magically work out. Everyone's kind, everyone's wonderful. You can trust anyone just because they're a grown-up, into the despair, into the cynicism of adolescence, from sympathy to antipathy, and the state of you can't trust anyone. There's corruption here. There's lies over here. There's hypocrisy over here. There's betrayal over here. Right? The cult culture, the history is littered with layer after layer of corruption and betrayal. And it's very easy for the adolescent to feel that nothing is pure. No one is sacred, that God is flawed, that perhaps they don't even exist. There's no God with this kind of corruption going on. And so we move into the antipathy of despair, cynicism, apathy, and hopelessness. Now, out of this, right, can come a couple of different fruits. One is to move towards entitlement, corruption, etc. So, everyone's flawed. What about me? It's my turn to be the bully. It's my turn to embezzle. It's my turn to have a little sex on the side, right? So this is one movement. We could call it entitlement. Now, the other movement is one of constructive pessimism. Now, this is moving from the apathy and despair and powerlessness and helplessness to things are likely to go bad, and so I'm going to work my ass off to make sure they are less bad and less likely to be bad. So this paradigm of constructive pessimism recognizes the negative state of the world and works hard to reduce the curse of the sociopathic protocol in human beings. So you have the cynicism moving into entitlement and embodying, the abuse of power, to constructive pessimism, which is working all the harder to avoid the descent into hell. Now, there's also a constructive optimism. Now, the adolescent moves into the recognition, the betrayal of innocence, the awareness of the innate imperfection in all power structure, in every parent, in themselves, in the world, in God. It's all just fucked up, right? So the destructive pessimism is, what's the fucking point? You know, why get a job, you know, in this corrupt, mediocre hellhole, right? Why trust anyone, right? So that's the adolescent moving from the innocence, from the naivete of the child. You know, someone said they were going to use this money to get a job, and they said so, and so here's some money, right? And this other person, you know, said that they look, you know, there's lipstick all over them and all that, and it looks like they're having an affair, but they said they're not, and they meant well, and so, you know, that's, I guess we'll take them at their word, right? So we have the naivete of the child going to the cynicism and despair of the adolescent, and then here we have a variety of different responses, right? So exploitation and entitlement stays in the adolescent territory, but it moves from, hey, what the fuck? You know, if life's this bad, well, why don't I just take advantage of other people just like every other person in power? So it's cynical despair moving to usury. And in that sense, it also becomes a negative copy, right? The child in innocence is the positive copy, right? The child trusts and downloads the biological and cultural code and just assumes that this is all great. The adolescent rejects that, but then can adopt the negative version of the cult code of, I'm going to be a better embezzler. I'm going to climb the ranks of the cult shadow, right? I won't get caught as well, so I'll be a better version of the outlaw, perhaps, but still from a cynical point of view. Now, moving in the more adult direction of constructive pessimism, this could go bad, that could go bad. We need to prepare for the next disaster. We need to reinforce our supplies. We need to plant trees for the future. We need to do research in this area. There's all these things that could go wrong. There's all these things that are going wrong, pessimism. But constructive refers to an active response to make them go less wrong, right? So in some studies, constructive pessimists, in other words, paranoid people who work really hard and really smart so that bad things don't happen, tend to achieve the most, right? Because you have a destructive optimism. The destructive optimism looks at all the horror in the world and says, well, somehow, right, magical thinking, going back to the child, somehow it's all going to work out, right? I don't know how. The universe is looking out, just don't talk to me about negativity and all that. Somehow it's going to work out. So we have destructive optimism. We have the destructive pessimism. It's pointless. I'm not going to do anything. So constructive refers to the amount of intelligent action that is taken in response to the worldview, right? See, if you believe in a better future and you work your ass off to create a better future, that's constructive optimism. That's up here. Destructive optimism is, it's all going to work out, so I'm just going to read my fantasy books and not study anything and not grow my skills and not go out and put out job applications because it's going to work out, right? And then when things go bad because we're not responding to our reality, we just retreat, right, into the delusion of somehow someone's going to rescue me. Now, the constructive optimism is the most mature and enjoyable perspective, right? Bill Gates, if you look at his biography with Microsoft, was a constructive pessimist, right? From the very moment of Microsoft's inception, Bill Gates was paranoid with the awareness, right? He wasn't naive. He was aware of how many large companies failed constantly. Now, out of that awareness and that paranoia, right, Andy Grove was also in Intel a constructive pessimist, right? Paranoid. What could go wrong? How can we work so that it doesn't go wrong, right? So Bill Gates worked very long hours, worried a tremendous amount, and did a lot of things to ensure that Microsoft survived, which it has to date, right? And one of the things that Bill was instrumental in forming was a $30 billion cash reserve that Microsoft could use to intimidate and bully other competitors and other businesses, and hire the best lawyers and weather just about any storm, right? If there was a new company that came online that was better than Microsoft, almost all of them were, they could buy it. And if they couldn't buy it, well, then they could bludgeon them out of business with legal fees, right? So one way or the other, just being paranoid and working one's ass off to reinforce a more stable position. That's constructive pessimism. Now, constructive optimism takes a bigger picture and recognizes the development of life over time. Constructive optimism might look something like this, right? We all have a reptilian brain with a fight, flight, freeze, sociopathic protocol. And the more we are traumatized as human beings, the more blood flows to the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain has a primary function to help us survive in a sociopathic environment, right? You don't need a fight, flight, freeze protocol in an empathic, competent environment. You need it in a sociopathic environment. A sociopathic environment is an environment where the big players are feeding on the small players, right? Gambling and casinos, sociopathic, right? Because the house always wins, and the house has lots of money, and some poor person trying to avoid their memories of Vietnam is going to addictively play at the slots and spend all their pension, right? So the strong get stronger, the weak get weaker. It's reptilian, right? And the reptilian brain of fight, flight, and freeze is designed to survive in sociopathic environments. Now, the reptilian brain was successful enough over a period of, hundreds of millions of years to develop the rational reptilian brain, right? So that's life iterating, becoming more intelligent, more efficient. We go from reptile to rational reptile. With 100x improvement in efficiency, the ability to imagine, to calculate things and predict the future using the pattern analyzing skill of the reptilian brain is a 100x improvement in life's intelligence and life's efficiency. And a constructive optimist can see that, there is a movement from being purely instinctually reptilian to being more creatively reptilian, more imaginatively reptilian. And we even get things like enlightened self-interest. I'm not going to hurt you because I don't want you to hurt me, is enlightened self-interest. It's rational reptile at its best. Right? I'm going to obey the traffic laws. I don't want to obey the traffic laws, says the reptile. Says the sociopath. I don't want to worry about other people. But if everyone doesn't obey the rules, then maybe I'll get killed. If I don't stop at a stop sign and someone else doesn't stop at a stop sign. So fear disciplines the rational reptile with enlightened self-interest, which is kind of a fruit of this rational reptile, enlightened self-interest. It's reptilian, it's sociopathic. It's not saying I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. It says I do this because I'm scared of what would happen if I use my imagination and see, the consequences, right? Now this, in turn, right, with free market systems and an enlightened self-interest framework of trust, leads to 100x improvement, enlightened self-interest. So, right, a tremendous improvement, right? All of capitalism emerges out of this framework of enlightened self-interest. You can go online on a marketplace such as Amazon, and you will be treated better there than ordering directly from a company's website, because Amazon allows the writing of reviews, and someone may not treat you very well because they give a damn about you, but they give a damn about their reviews. It's called enlightened self-interest. And so, but that's a lot better. Enlightened self-interest is a lot better than just rational reptile of let's use our ability to imagine to kill as many people as possible, as efficiently as possible, right? So, and each of these things leads to more and more competency and more abundance, right? With efficiency, with competency comes abundance. And at a certain point, the rational reptile creates a level of security for itself and those it loves, its family, its network, its country, that the need for love and belonging blossoms in the human brain. And in the hierarchy of human needs. In the hierarchy of human needs, pioneered by Abraham Maslow, the first need is survival. The second need is security. And the third need is love and belonging. You don't worry about love and belonging. Love and belonging is sacrificed in order to survive. Love and belonging is sacrificed in order to be secure in that survival. And if you understand that hierarchy, right, you realize that love and belonging is not safe or sustainable until everyone in the network is secure in their survival, right? Because in the hierarchy of priority, love and belonging is third, which means that anytime a member of the network is insecure in their survival, they will prioritize reptilian behavior, fight, flight, freeze, and please, deception, betrayal, etc., over empathy, over trustworthiness, right? So if you want trustworthy people, you have to deal with people who are secure in their survival. This is why torture does not work as a method of extracting information, right? Because someone who is terrified that the truth will lead to their survival is willing to lie. Right? So it's not a good interrogation technique. It's also not a good interrogation technique to generate increased volumes of homelessness, for example, and expect people to be ethical, right? We don't know if you're going to survive, you're homeless. In fact, we know that your lifespan is shortened by an average statistical 26 years as a result of being chronically homeless. In other words, your lifespan is going to almost cut in half. And we're not doing anything about that, right? But we'd like you to obey the law, right? It doesn't work. It's profoundly stupid and destructive to co-create a reality where large segments of the population are insecure in their survival and then expect them to behave empathically and meet needs of love and belonging over sociopathically and meet needs of survival and security, right? But those people who are secure in their survival naturally hunger for something more. They hunger for love and belonging, the third in the hierarchy of needs. And in order to co-create love and belonging, there is a foundation of trustworthiness. You do not get love and belonging. You do not get empathy. You do not get trust until you get trustworthiness, right? So love and belonging grow on the foundation of trust, and trust grows on the foundation of trustworthiness. And trustworthiness is the domain of empathy. And there are two flags in the territory of empathy. If you see these two flags flying, predominantly in the emotional, in the behavioral landscape, you know that you are dealing with a trustworthy group, a trustworthy country, a trustworthy individual. Right? And a trustworthy country is just a country where the vast majority of the people in it are trustworthy. Two flags, two indicators about whether or not you're in a trustworthy and empathic country, or if you are in a sociopathic, in an untrustworthy environment. The first flag is the question, who is in the most pain? Now, the people that are in the most pain are the people fearing for survival, fearing for security of survival. I'm barely surviving, but I have no security that I'm going to survive next week, next month. That person is in pain. I'm not surviving. I mean, let alone next month. I'm barely surviving now. Right? That's maximum pain. Which is why the first question in an empathic protocol is who is in the most pain? Meaning whose survival is threatened the most? That's the question. Number two, how can we help? Meaning a sociopath looks for the people who are in the most pain and says, how can I use that to my advantage? Right? That's sociopathic. A sociopath doesn't even look. Who cares about other people? I'm focused on myself. Yes, that people there are suffering around the world, but I don't care about that. I just care about myself. So that's sociopathic territory, right? So an empath, someone who is human, right? Because we're still dealing with human-animal up until survival and security of survival. We're dealing with a rational reptile. A human animal can think, can strategize, can make lots of money, can bully other people, can gain political power, can lie, can cheat, can have sex, can raise a family. A human animal can do all of those things very effectively, unencumbered with empathy, unencumbered with concern for other people. Right? That's a human animal. The human being does not come online until the empathic brain, which is the brain that facilitates and co-creates empathy, trustworthiness, trust, and love and belonging, that meets the need for love and belonging by creating trustworthiness, leading to trust, leading to empathy, leading to love and belonging. And the first question is, who is in the most pain? If you are in a group, or if you are a person who asks that question, who is in the most pain? You are a human being. Every human goes first to that question, because the people in the most pain who are ignored, marginalized, betrayed, and dissociated from are dehumanized, meaning they feel less than human, they feel shamed by the rational reptile that is not human enough to respond. Right? And reptilian behavior, just like any meme, spreads like a virus. Right? When you watch 10,000 people drive by the homeless in your town, and every one of you turn up the music, you become more reptilian, because that's not how a human being behaves. Right? Now, it's not black and white, by the way. You can be 10% human and 90% reptile. You can be 30% human and 70% reptile. But as soon as you flip that point where you're primarily human, the question comes to the foreground: who is in the most pain? That begins inside. Which part of me is in the most pain? Who in my family is in the most pain? Who in my neighborhood is in the most pain? Now you're deep into rational reptile when that is none of your business, none of my business. Right? Those aren't human beings. Those are rational reptiles that have developed a protocol that sanctions dissociation, separation, and a lack of response to pain. Right? And so naturally, we can see that we are primarily, maybe 70% rational reptile in our cult. We live in a cult where the protocols and the memes make sense if 70% of what we do is rational reptile. Enlightened self-interest, sociopathic stuff when we don't get caught, out and out sociopathic behavior in the open, right? I don't care about you. You have nothing to do with me, right? Happy to kill you, right? It isn't until you become human, meaning when blood flows primarily to the empathic brain, that you might grieve at killing another human being, right? Particularly if they stand in the way of power, right? The reptile likes power. And so the reptile is celebrating. We won, right? We dropped smart bombs on 1 million innocent civilians, and we beat them. We've got more power. Hooray, says the rational reptile. Right? But the human being is trying to imagine It seems like those people are in a lot more pain than I am. They're also in a lot more shame, knowing that my tax money is going over there. And I'd like to do something about it, right? Now, it's important to have gone through the despair of adolescence, right? So that we're not retreating into naivete, right? Because it's important to understand who you're dealing with and why, right? Any body, any physical body, any person on the planet, statistically, who is in a questionable state of survival socially, sexually, financially, physically, in their identity. They may lose their identity. They feel very fragile around that. They don't know who they are, right? Anyone who experiences the world as threatening their survival will have strong blood flowing to the reptilian brain and will look at the world primarily through the lens of fight, flight, freeze, and please. Now, to break that down, that's fight anytime you can win. Right? Bullies don't pick on bigger bullies. They pick on people who are weak that they can be sure to win, right? So you fight what is smaller than you and you bully it when you're a reptile. You run from what's bigger than you that you can't win. You freeze or hide when neither of those options seem expedient. And you ass-lick or please a larger power structure who promises to take care of you if you keep them in power, right? The crocodile, says, you drive the prey here, I won't eat you and I'll give you a little bit of the meat. The politician says to the political lobbyist, you give me 10 million of PAC money and I'll write you a sweet deal once I get elected and we'll both screw the people, right? You'll help me get elected and I'll have all the power to screw the people. And I'll give you a bill so that you screw the people too, right? And we'll both gain from me getting power from the majority, right? That's rational reptile. So fight, flight, freeze, and please are the statistically most likely responses to the fear of survival. Emotional identity survival, right? That's when you see, why do religious people commit crimes of hate when their religion feels threatened? Like, why do Christians break their own commandments to burn a mosque, killing people if possible? Why do Muslims break their own teachings to kill Christians, right? It's nothing to do with the religious ethic. It's the fear ethic of feeling that my identity, my pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that I define me as is being threatened by this other group, by this other identity. And I feel insecure. I don't know who I am if these people exist, so I got to kill them, right? So we're dealing with animals who are pretending, who have identified with a religious dogma. We're not dealing with religious people. Religious people protect their teaching at the expense of their identity, right? Christ didn't give up Christianity in order to escape the Romans. Christ stood up and was willing to be sacrificed, right? But that's a tremendous amount of inner security and of the identity. Like, you can kill my body, but you cannot kill my eternal soul. That's called turning the other cheek, but that's not how 95% of Christians or Muslims behave, right? If you look at the history of Christianity across the globe, you will find that the most number of people in the last 1,000 years have been killed by Christians, and then probably Muslims next, right? To look at this, and communism and other dogmas maybe even beat both of those out, right? We're dealing with insecurity of survival, of sense of self. Now, the final question for the human being, dealing with the empathic brain, creating trustworthiness that leads to trust, the final question is, how can we help? Because empathy acknowledges the link between us, which is what creates trustworthiness. What is a trustworthy person? A trustworthy person is someone who says, I wouldn't like it if someone slept with my girlfriend when I wasn't there. You say you have a boyfriend. No, I'm not going to sleep with you. I'm not going to participate in an act of betrayal. If you want to extricate yourself cleanly from that relationship and honorably, and you want to form a relationship with me, then we'll go along with it. I'd love to have sex with you, but I'm not going to prime the pump of someone else's rage, humiliation, hurt, worthlessness. I'm not going to make it likely that another person feels all that just so I can have a one-night stand. I'm not doing it. It's not the world I want to live in. Who's in the most pain? Probably that person. How can we help? Do it honorably. Well, that's no fun, says the reptile, right? So there's no judgment. Life has progressed from the alligator brain 200 million years ago to a point where some of the people, some of the time, are human beings. A lot of people, a lot of the time, are in the state of enlightened self-interest, meaning they do things out of fear of being caught. That wouldn't be good for my career. My church might judge me if I did this. I'd like to do this, but if we do it, we have to keep it a secret because I can't be judged at church. I can't be judged here. It's about fear. My identity as a Muslim, as a Christian, as a this would be threatened. My own people would turn on me if they knew I was gay, says the rational reptile, right? Enlightened self-interest says, okay, I'm gay, but only when I'm traveling, right? Because I want the inheritance. And I live with reptiles. See, and these reptiles will cut me out of the money with no regard for my well-being if I threaten their identity. And I would threaten their identity by loving someone of my own gender. So I'm surrounded by reptiles, and so I'm going to behave like a rational reptile with enlightened self-interest. I will deceive around this thing and this thing because my survival would be threatened. So when you're in solid empathy, you focus on the other, first of all, right? That's what empathy is. You say, you know what? You will feel betrayed if you left your money to a gay person because you haven't learned how great gay people are. Well, you've come a long way. You've kept alive, right? You've learned a few things. You're still a fool, like most of us. But you know what? I'm not worried about me. This is why it takes a security of survival to reach that point. I'm not worried about me. I don't want you to feel betrayed. So I'm going to sit down and say, you know I'm in your will, and I know that you have lots of bigotry and judgment and fear, I know that you think that homosexuals are terrible people. And I know that's not true. But I also, want to respect your choice, your freedom to judge me, to go through your delusions as long as you need to do that. I don't need your money, but I want you to know that I'm not heterosexual. And if you want nothing to do with me, I'll work with you to separate our dynamics so that you can be in your little box, right? Right? Your little cloister where all gay people are bad, right? Where God is a judgmental son of a bitch who burns people at the stake for liking people their own gender, right? That's what you've been taught. It's a big thought to think that what you were taught might be wrong. There's an idea, right? People have only been wrong most of the time throughout history. You might be wrong. But I understand that that might be a big idea for you. And so I'm going to let you write me out of the will and have nothing to do with me for as long as you need. But if you grow up one day, I'm here, right? So that's thinking about the other. Now, the rational reptile with enlightened self-interest can't do that. They say, I'm broke. I don't know what I'm doing. I may really need that $300,000 in my inheritance at the rate things are going. Maybe I'll contract HIV. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to be homosexual, but I'm going to hide it every time I go home. And you can be my lover, but you can't come to Thanksgiving, right? And so that's enlightened self-interest, right? Yes, I know it hurts your feelings that it looks like I'm ashamed of you. Yes, I know it is humiliating that I won't stand up for you in public. But I'm a rational reptile. In this area, my fear trumps my humanity. I'm not trustworthy. I'm not focused on your pain of my lover. I'm focused on my fear of the pain of not having the money, right? So most of the most of the physical forms that we call human beings on the planet are rational reptile towards most other people most of the time. But it's not black or white, right? As we create more security, as we create more options, as we create more competence in our survival and security, more and more people are primarily focusing on being a trustworthy person, which involves transparency, which involves looking for true win-win based on this win-win or no deal, right? More and more people are in that human being state where they're secure enough that they don't need to lie, they don't need to hide, they don't need to fight, they don't need to run, they don't need to ass lick, and they don't need to betray their own people to buy their survival. Right? Timothy Leary, after being put in prison for promoting psychedelics, became a scapegoat, right? And he was told he wouldn't get out of prison ever unless he turned on his friends, right? So we go from tune in, tune out, drop out, to I'm going to sell you to, so you're going to go to jail so that I don't have to. You're going to face hell. Many people are going to face hell in jail, but I won't, right? So it goes from, the human being free and feeling good to, gee, I don't feel good at all. What do I have to do to feel better? Well, you have to betray your friends, right? The traumatized the frightened ego descends into rational reptile and says, you mean all I have to do is give you 3 names and 3 of my friends have to go to jail for 50 years and then I get to walk free? And the reptilian government, right? Governments are primarily reptilian in all, in multiple levels, right? It's a reptilian relationship with its people, right? So, yeah, that's all you have to do. You have to become an animal, and you have to help us make your friends become animals, and then you can go free. Right? That's a bargain of interest to the rational reptile. Right? And statistically, human beings become reptiles in secret when their survival is insecure, when it is uncertain whether they will live. They will betray their friends, their lovers, themselves. They will fight, flight, freeze, and please until they gain a sense of survival and security. And only then do they return to the third need, which is the desire for love and belonging, which has the price of giving up the expedient choices of reptilian behavior. So after who's in the most pain, the next question is, how can we help? Because an empathic human being understands that we are part of one species, one humanity. And it is our honor to respond to the dis-ease, to the suffering within our demographic of another human being. So that's when you're dealing with a 100% clear signal of humanity. Right? Because remember, it's not a black and white signal. You may be 10% sociopath, 10% rational sociopath. You might be 50% enlightened self-interest as a form of rational sociopath. I'll scratch your back and you scratch my back. I'll do the right thing because I might get in trouble if I don't, right? So that's the rule of law. That's capitalism. Right? I'd love to destroy you if I could, but I'm not going to cross the law because then I might be imprisoned, says the rational reptile, says enlightened self-interest. So I'm going to keep the law and you're going to keep the law and we'll have a better world because we're both frightened of getting caught, right? So that's the environment where as soon as it's dark, we're behind doors. Oh yeah, I cheat on my taxes. Oh yeah, I have a secret lover. Oh yeah, I do this, I do that, right? But don't tell anyone, right? Because enlightened self-interest and corruption doesn't work unless there's secrecy. So secrecy is the key, the key facilitator of the rational reptile, where you have a public image and a private image. And most people do. They have a public image and they have a private image. And understanding that most people do, then there's this priority of privacy. Nobody should know what's your business. Nobody should be able to see your tax return. Nobody should be able to do this. Because we all have this gap between the public persona and our private mask, and we accept that we are all rational reptiles, and so we should just be allowed to do that. And you only let a few people know some things some of the time. So we have moved in the last 200 million years. Life has moved from 100% reptilian to rational reptile to enlightened self-interest. And we're now at a point where, let's say 30% of the people, 30% of the time, are primarily empathic. Right? 30% of the people, 30% of the time, are primarily empathic. They're actually interested in other people's suffering. And some of them are even interested enough to do something about it rather than just say, that's dreadful. Someone should do something about it. That's not empathy. That's rational reptile, right? Because rational reptile says I should look like I care, but if I actually send any money, I'll be less well off, and that would be bad for me, so I'm not going to send any money. I'm just going to look at the news and complain that other people should be spending their money, right? Better, right? Because that makes sense, right? I conserve all of my money, and I still feel righteous, and I still look good, right? Bravo, enlightened self-interest. 0, humanity, or low percentage, right? Because in order to make the choice to actually help someone or send money or respond to some voice of ours inside, we have to, right? We have to have a majority want that more than the other part of us wants to conserve energy. The reptile wants to hoard. You know, the archetype of the dragon. I don't want anyone to have anything, even if I can't do anything with it. I don't care. I'm afraid. I want to survive, and the more I have and the less you have, it's a win-lose paradigm. So back, and then up here we have the transcendent brain that feels divine, that feels part of something bigger than ourselves, part of something more than is human, that a few percent of us touch 1 or 2% of our time when we enter a transcendent state. Dancing, singing, psychedelics, orgasm, right? We touch the part of our brain that is so expansive that it feels one with everything. That's not sociopathic, that's transcendent, right? So the constructive optimist says, you know what? Life isn't doing such a bad job. Life will continue to do a good job as well. Life is not doing such a bad job. Life will continue to do a good job. And that's okay, right? We don't have to walk from slime into transcendent gods and goddesses overnight. Slowly, over time, the world is becoming a better place. However, most people on the planet today do not have their human needs met with any great capacity. 2, until they do, most people will behave in a reptilian way a certain amount of the time. And so I'm not going to be naive. And I will work to see that more people meet more of their needs, including myself, during my lifetime. I will facilitate, I will help to make the world a more competent place. I will become more competent myself. I will create more abundance myself. And as I create survival and security for myself, I will share that with others to a point where the world is more trustworthy and more human because of my life here. And I will not expect people who are scared, ignorant, incompetent, and fearful to behave like human beings, because they're not. They're rational reptiles learning how to manipulate and survive in a sociopathic environment. But I will also understand that they will become, that over time, all of life will recycle into higher levels of competence, into higher levels of abundance, right? Because the equation is that competence equals abundance. And abundance equals fulfillment of needs. And fulfillment of needs equals empathy. And empathy equals trustworthiness, which equals trust, which equals love and belonging. Meaning, as soon as we create sometime in the next 100 million years, sometime in the next million years in all likelihood, until we create a level of competence where every human being that wants to is surviving with security of survival, the blood will continue to flow into the reptilian brain, both for the participant in the abuse and the witness of the abuse. Because empathy does not differentiate on the basis of race, bigotry, stupidity, ignorance, skin color, gender. Empathy differentiates based on the feeling, what it's like to be the other person, and an interest in understanding that, which is why a truly empathic person cannot be racist. A sociopath can be racist. They can be all kinds of ists. But an empathic person cannot be racist because the experience of the other has nothing to do with gender, this, that, the other, right? If someone's feeling happy, whether they're a male, a woman, a hedgehog, or whatever, right? You respond to the feeling. If someone's in pain, you don't say, oh, your skin is black and you're in pain. That's a mental thing. That's not an empathic response. Empathic response is, oh, you're in pain. How can I help? So constructive optimism understands that life is evolving in an iterative direction towards higher levels of intelligence, which include the movement towards empathy. And that comes on the foundation of competence. Competence is what creates the abundance, and the abundance is what meets the needs that release the blood from the reptilian and rational brain into the empathic and transcendent brain. And so constructive optimism sees all that and understands it's not going to happen in a lifetime, right? You and I are never going to see a world of pure empathy. We're going to keep vacillating up and down, a little bit of empathy and then betrayal of that empathy as someone got scared and stole our money, right? If you are secure that you have all the money that you need, you don't steal people's money. There's no need for it. It's the basis that there may be less, there's not enough in the future that people will steal the money, right? But all that means is that you lack confidence in your own competence to have as much money as you need, right? If I can create money at a drop of a hat, why would I go to the bother of stealing it, right? If I can create friendships at a drop of the hat, why do I need to undermine your reputation? Why am I jealous? I've got more than I can do, right? So superabundance comes from a threshold of competence, which leads directly to that abundance, which reduces the fear of pain to the point where people naturally prioritize each other, prioritize the third in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is love and belonging, right? So what's the problem on the planet today? A lack of competence. What's the solution? More competence. What kind of competence? Competence to create higher and higher levels of sustainable well-being, right? So people move from animal to human as the blood moves from the reptilian brain to the empathic brain through the experience of abundance that is facilitated by competence. You can have a transcendent psychedelic experience and open up and feel one with the world, but after the drug fails to deliver that message to the body of superabundance, you look around you and see this person is in pain and no one's doing anything about it, and I'm afraid of that, nobody's doing anything about that. We go back into the fear of pain, which re-stimulates the flow to the reptilian brain. And you have human animals fighting for scarce resources out of fear. So, maybe 60% of all human behavior on the planet today is rational reptiles jockeying for scarce resources that we lack the competence to create, because there are many human beings that are not surviving. And more than half of human beings are insecure in their survival. And more than 90% of human beings do not have a deep sense of love and belonging. Right? Maybe 95% of human beings do not have a high sense of self-esteem. Clear ideals, clear principles that move us towards those ideals, and a high level of self-respect and self-regard because we live consistent with our principles, rather than doing what we have to do to get rich or survive or make someone else look bad, right? So the constructive optimist says that over time, over the next 100 million years, life is going in a good direction. Life has come a long way from being the size of a pea bursting into a bang, right? We can be optimistic. Life is tens of billions of years old. It keeps getting more interesting, keeps getting better over and over again. Life is a winner. Life has a great trajectory. So sooner or later, life is going to bring about this superabundance because it's our nature to want to become more. And it just takes time and skill to become more. And we're well on our way. And so the constructive optimism takes action, believes in the ultimate fate of divinity, of beauty, and takes action today to make that a little bit more likely. Blessings, and thank you for watching.